As Jad is here with us from Hillsong. And hey, Jad, you're from New Zealand.
Yes.
Originally.
Yep.
Is that right? Who else? Someone? Just did something over there? Okay.
New Zealand over there.
All right.
It's good.
Jad, how did you get involved with Hillsong?
I moved to Australia from New Zealand when I was 20 years old to do the Bible college there, and got involved with the creative stream. I also got involved with the youth ministry and the creative team and pretty much whatever else I could. I was a single guy and I didn't really have. I just figured if I'm going to do this, I might as well like kind of put as much into it as I possibly could. So I was in the skate ministry. And I was a terrible skater. Anyway, you know, I was out every night of the week. I just tried to give it as much as I possibly could. And, you know, I did a year of Hillsong College, got involved heavily with the creative team. And basically, with the youth ministry was what I loved. You know, I led a small group of young guys. That was my little connect group that I led. And I just loved it because it was kind of like, not only was it kind of hands-on leadership kind of stuff, but it was also, you begin to see potential in people's lives, and so you start to get really inspired about the fact that God has given everybody a purpose. So that kind of really pushed me into doing stuff with leadership, and basically I would stack chairs before youth and lead my RDG. One day, the guitarist kind of just didn't show up, so they're like, "We need you to play guitar," and I was kind of like, "I've got this. I've got to stack some chairs, and I've got to do my RDG, so I can't really do it." And they're like, "No, seriously, man, we need a guitar player." So I played guitar. Then it kind of never went away. They kept needing a guitar player. Eventually, they needed someone to roster the band, so I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll roster the band." Then they needed someone to sing an item, so I sang an item. Then they needed someone. You get what I'm saying? It just snowballed, and I kind of woke up this morning, and here we are. So,
how long ago did you say that was? So how many years now?
That was 2001.
2001. Wow.
Yep.
14 years. So it's been 14 years since you've been at Hillsong. So
yep.
That's amazing. Who are some of the people that shape you and mold you, kind of in your ministry, and who do you look up to, and who inspires you?
Yeah, well, I mean, without a doubt, there's somebody you probably never heard of, Darlene Check. She, that joke always goes well, you know? But yeah, I mean, to be honest, you know, Darlene, Ruben, Brian Houston, I mean, they just have this ability to shape you by just the way they live, the way they lead, and so just watching them being under Darlene, I mean, I learnt so many lessons under Darlene, and you know, just watching, but also kind of getting in trouble, and you know, doing the wrong thing, and just the gracious way that they would lead us. It kind of never. It didn't squash us. It kind of, when we did make mistakes or when we did get in trouble, they were so gracious, and so the way that we were disciplined or the way that we were kind of addressed propelled us forward. I feel like that, I'm so grateful for that.
I mean, you talk about sort of the leadership, kind of, I guess that's almost obedience to leadership or submitting to authority in our churches, how important that is. Actually, we're going to be doing a session on that later. Tim Klassen and Amy Klassen, father and daughter team from Central Heights Church, will be doing that session, and it's going to be really powerful, I think.
Right.
So Tim, for you, I guess on the same kind of plank, like who's been someone who's been kind of throughout the years been molding you, and how has it been difficult sort of being a worship leader who, you know, as creatives, I suppose we're all a little bit, you know, we can be rambunctious and we want to do things our way. How do you find the balance between just kind of wanting to do what you do, but also having to submit to a certain leadership?
Great question. I think obviously my parents have been massive role models. My dad's a pastor who's retired now. But I mean, Mark was talking about his dad, you know, being amazing. But my dad's even more amazing. And I'll tell you why. Because, you know, he's 75. My mum and dad, literally as I flew out to Canada, they were flying in, having spent 3 weeks in Pakistan training up church leaders. And, you know, they're so radical in terms of stepping out in faith. So that's kind of been hugely formation in my life. But I can think of two key leaders. One would be a guy called Mike Pilavachi, a big hairy Greek who heads up this thing called Soul Survivor. And he, when I was 11 years old, just started to encourage me and invest in me. When I was 18, he asked me to lead worship at this massive youth festival called Soul Survivor. And, I'd been basically leading in my youth group and suddenly stepping up, and there's thousands of young people. And I remember telling him, you're crazy. I'm not qualified. I'm not good enough. I'm not experienced enough. You're an idiot, basically. And he's like, no, I believe in you. And so he kind of was amazing at just giving young people opportunities. He did the very same thing for Matt Redman and a whole bunch. So he was, and someone who, much like Jad was saying, just invited us into his life. And actually the things I learned from him were less kind of sitting down and saying, when you lead, think about this, or when you do this, think. Actually, I think one of the things I observed about him was just his incredible generosity. He would never let anyone pay for a meal out. He was so kingdom-minded with the way he released leaders. And so it's those things you begin to observe, and you want to become like that. And then another guy's a guy called Nicky Gumbel, pioneer of Alpha and vicar of HDB. And again, such an amazingly gifted man who's so humble and so constantly wanting to grow. I think the one thing I took from him was, this guy, the Alpha Course, this thing he pioneered, I think 25 million people have done it, 180 nations or whatever. And there's an article in the secular press in Britain a while ago saying that probably no man has had more of an influence in terms of evangelism in Europe than Nicky Gumbel since John Wesley. So this is pretty impressive, and so if anyone could be like, hey, I know how to do this church leadership stuff. I've arrived, I'm done. It'd be Nicky, but after every single talk, he'll get a team of people around him. Sometimes I'll be invited into that. What could I change? How could I do it better? How could I be clearer? Such humility and such a willingness to constantly be learning and growing. And I think that's why him as a leader and his ministry is constantly relevant, because he's never settling. And I think those things you see all of that, and it inspires you. And I guess, just to quickly link into that question of coming under that, it's a choice. And actually, there's something very powerful about deferring to leaders. And at times that can be frustrating, at times it can be costly, but actually, more often than not, it's just liberating. And now for me, sort of suddenly stepping up to be the number one leader, that's much more scary. And I'm often like, there's a decision to be made, and I'll look behind me, for Mike and Nicky, and they're no longer there. And it's those moments you think, wow, what an amazing privilege to serve under people. And if we give our best and if we serve them graciously, there's such a blessing that comes with that.
So I think kind of going off of that, how do you continue to equip yourself and stay relevant? I mean, with all the things that are going on, what are you doing to kind of advance kind of what it is that you're doing and mastering your craft?
I know for me, when I realized that the how will always change, the how will always evolve, always change, and if we camp out on how we do things, then it's going to lose its power, and what we're doing will lose its power. And so I decided to focus more on the why, kind of like what Mark was saying before, but because the why puts the wheels on the how. And so for me, I'll always start with the why. And usually the way God works with me is he draws my attention towards something. And I'm a very practical person, so I immediately start to figure out how that outworks practically and how that outworks with gifting, with effectiveness as a communicator or as a leader or as a vocalist or whatever. And so I'm like, to be honest, I'm just a church kid, so I'm the furthest thing from a professional rock star like you'll ever find. I love cutting my grass. You guys get it, right? So I get in my car and I listen to vocal tuition in my car, and I sing, and I look like an idiot in traffic. I just do things because I know that if I'm more effective in my craft, then God can perfect my weaknesses with his power. As long as I'm giving everything I've got, as long as I understand the why and I'm applying it to my how, then he comes along with his power and perfects it. And that's all I could hope for. But I feel like if we're moving, if we're progressing, if we have a commitment to kind of being better, bringing excellence, and excellence isn't perfection. Excellence is so far from perfection. Excellence is your very best right now for him. And so if you think about it like that, if I lead worship on Sunday and then I lead worship again the following Sunday, I've had 7 days to equip myself to be better, to know him more, to read his word. So as excellence is a progressive thing. And so I feel like, but once we understand the why, and once we put emphasis on the why, then we actually get to see the how in a new way.
Mm-hmm. Going off of what Mark was saying earlier about, a worship leader is not working yourself into a spotlight. You are. God has given you grace in that, and you are in the spotlight. How do you stay humble, really, like practically? How have you been? How have you been doing that? And what are some tips on doing that?
Get married.
He's really trying to track like kind of a flow, but then they just do that, and then it's kind of gone.
I'm not even joking. No, because I think it's the brilliant point about isolation. I think when you choose to invest in relationships, whether that's marriage or community or friendships or your family, in a family everyone mucks in. That's how it works. There's no stars in a family. You're all kind of just serving together, and actually that sense of being known and the real deal, and actually whether you're on a stage or speaking at this or leading that or doing whatever, it doesn't matter. It comes down to, we all need to be loved. We all need to be understood. We all have our insecurities. We all have our hang-ups. And we're works in progress. And I think for me, that again is why local church is so important, because it's in that place we actually find true friendship and we allow ourselves to really go deep. I thought actually what Christy shared last night was quite profound with the target thing, and it's so true when we just allow ourselves to find out who we are, and we do that in community. We cannot do that in isolation, and so that's where the humility thing begins. And I think it's something we have to pursue. That's the other thing I've realized, is that I used to think people are either gifted, they're either humble, or they're like arrogant jerks. But actually the most humble people I meet are those who just, they know the reality of who they are, and they're just pursuing, how can I serve, how can I love, bringing myself before God, remembering it's not about me, it's all about you. So it's something we chase after.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Just wanted to throw a couple questions into this. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but just a couple questions that came from the congregation. They tweeted a couple questions in. This has to do with the congregation now a little bit, and kind of our Sundays, a bit more practical. They want to know, someone wants to know, how do you discern a set list? How do you balance the desire to please God, but also please the congregation?
I'm the wrong guy to ask because like I'm going to offend people.
You got to do it, man. This is a safe place. People are praying for you. It's okay. Cameras are rolling, yeah, sorry.
Okay, to be completely frank, I don't care what the congregation thinks. I don't. I know one thing. When you magnify God, you humble yourself. And I know that people come into church and they're in whatever state they're in, they come in burdened and they come in heavy laden. Maybe they're working through grief. Maybe they're working through financial pressure. Maybe their marriage issue, whatever. People come in and you have no idea. You have no idea what the state of the people is, but one thing that you do know is that they need the presence of God. That's the one thing that they need. And so, but sometimes, I'm using all of my workshop material right now, but sometimes, do you know why I think we have worship leaders? Not because we need more Christian rock stars. That is not the reason we have worship leaders. It's because sometimes people need leadership, and that's the truth of it. Sometimes people need to that they don't quite know how to get from a place where they are burdened and bound to a place where they can respond to the presence of God and where they feel safe to surrender in His presence. And so when I'm writing a song list, I start with my last song first, because I already have a picture of where I want to finish, where I want to end up, and then I think about kind of, sometimes I'll think about, take last weekend with what happened in Paris. I kind of knew that people would be coming into church just a little bit confused, a little bit kind of heavy. So my first song was In God We Trust, because I wanted to establish from the outset that our trust is only in the Lord. And then I'll go on and I'll sing a song called Oh Praise the Name, high praise, magnification, so that we can build faith in the room, so that people actually begin to build courage and faith in who God is in them. And then maybe we'll sing a song of prayer and petition that may kind of, that requires faith, that requires something of ourselves to kind of declare, and then we'll end. I'll usually, because that's the way Pastor Brian likes it, we'll end on a song just of high praise, magnification.
The next question was, how do you handle congregational critique and what they want? They'll come up to you and say, I would love to have done that song, or it's too loud, or whatever. Like, how do you?
I'll just say this. I'll just say this, and then I'll give it to Tim, because Pastor Brian says if for everyone who says it's too loud, there'll be 10 people that says it's too quiet. For everyone who says it's too hot, there'll be 10 people that says it's too cold. And so what you're going to find is you'll be just ping-ponging around. and so you don't discount what people, the feedback and the input that people give you, but at the end of the day, we actually need to build something, and we're working towards building people. This is what I was going to say, was we're not worshiping our people. So when people go, man, I didn't enjoy worship, I'm like, that's a shame. But it's not, we weren't worshiping you, so it's cool. We were I know, I sound so mean. I sound so mean, but yeah, I mean, the problem is if you're governed by opinion, you're going to go nowhere. So you have to have a conviction, and you have to take on valued kind of input. But if you're swayed too much by opinion, you won't build anything.
Yes, brilliant. I mean, I think the only thing I'd add is, which links in, is that intentionality. And I think so often, if we're not careful, we end up being reactive to everything that's going on. And actually, I think great leaders gather team, because you don't want to do it on your own, and you begin to ask the question, what do we want to see in 5 years? And how do we begin now to get to that place? And how do we begin to lead in a way? And you mentioned the kind of thing, start with why. That kind of, I think Simon Sinek did that book on great businesses. They start with why. Why are we doing this? And again, with your churches, why are we worshiping? What do we believe happens when we worship? How do we get to a place where people are engaged? How do we get to a place where people come, burdened, yes, but ready to magnify God? How do we build up musicians and teams that are willing to serve, that will give themselves, that will pour out their best to serve? And that doesn't happen overnight. That takes a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of culture building. And I think even for me as a worship leader, I think I sometimes feel I got into a bit of a trap where I was just thinking about how do I make this Sunday the most amazing time of worship, rather than thinking how can I disciple and lead people in a way that we kind of cultivate worshipers in the congregation. So it doesn't matter actually what song you necessarily sing, they're ready to worship. And actually, as they leave the building on a Sunday, throughout the week, they're going to be worshiping, they're going to be seeking God, glorifying Him. And so I think that intentionality is really important.
Thank you. Thanks Tim and Jad for sharing a little bit of your insights. So